Oh, yeah.
He'll probably call you tomorrow with notes on what you could have done.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Valley Beth Shalom's Seder. Why is tonight different? Why is tonight different from all other nights? Because a year ago we did this, and we never imagined we'd have to do it again.
Right.
Because for this whole year, we have tasted our own version of separation and isolation and something akin to a form of restriction and bondage. Because we all prayed and hoped that we would be free of that by this time, and we're almost there. We're almost there. So welcome to this wonderful evening of celebration of freedom, of celebration of hope, of celebration of faith, of opening our eyes to all the wonders of the world about us. I want to welcome everyone. We want to begin tonight, and we'll continue tonight with a little bit of song. Cantors, Fox, lead us in a bit of Dayan.
Please join. Hotzianu mimitzrayim, Hotzianu mimitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Ilu natan lanu et ha-Shabbat, natan lanu et ha-Shabbat, Dayenu, 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 Ilu natan lanu et ha-Torah, natan lanu, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu.
That was wonderful. Dayenu to all of us. Dayenu for all of the miracles that we've experienced together. Dayenu for being together and having a wonderful time together. Dayenu for the promise of tomorrow that is still yet to come. Tonight we are going to take a trip into time, a trip into faith, a trip into the deepest heart of the Jewish people. Tonight we're going to take a trip to a moment that is dark and grim and painful. Because tonight we're going to reenact the last night we were in Egypt. We are slaves. Our parents are slaves. Their parents were slaves, and their parents were slaves. And then came this fellow Moses and said, pack your things. We're going to leave right away. Get ready to go. And you know, most of us didn't believe him. It's hard to believe when you've been a slave that long. It's hard to believe when you've been oppressed. It's hard to have faith that tomorrow could be different than yesterday. But a few of us said, we'll go. And tonight's the last night. And here we sit in our slave quarters. Here we sit waiting for the signal to leave, wearing our travel clothes, with our passports in our pockets and our suitcases packed right here next to us. Here we sit ready to leave. We have to feel that. We have to remember tonight all the generations that came before us who were slaves, and we have to anticipate the gift and blessing of freedom. We have to imagine all the generations of Jewish people who sat in these seats before us, the rabbis during the Roman times, experiencing the bitter oppression of Roman rule, the Jews of the Middle Ages in Babylon and in Persia and in Yemen and in Europe, experiencing expulsion and inquisition and discrimination and hatred and prejudice and castigation. A small band of inmates in the Auschwitz concentration camp who huddled in a corner of a barracks in the middle of the night so the guards wouldn't hear them to recite the words of the Seder. The fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto huddling in a basement in a building as the Nazis bombed and bombed and bombed the ghetto to stop the uprising. The first pioneers in the land of Israel, who took off their farm clothes and put on their white shirts and celebrated a Seder. Every generation we gather at this table with wine and matzah, with maror and charoset. We gather together and hold our hands and tell this wonderful, wonderful story. We are the people who saw the sea split. We are the people who felt the first breath of freedom and sang the songs of freedom. We are the people who understood that that's the way the world is meant to be. Slaves are meant to be freed, the oppressed meant to be lifted up, the disempowered given a voice and a place in the world, and every human being given dignity. That's what this Seder is all about. So let's begin together. Let's begin together as we do every year with the blessings of Kiddush and the blessings of Mavdil between the Shabbos that is leaving us and the Pesach that is about to begin. Fill your wine cup with whatever you've got, maybe some Chardonnay, maybe some Cabernet, or maybe some Manischewitz, and join us. Cantor Fox, lead us in the Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'am veromemanu mikol hashon וקידשנו במצוותיו. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו ביעבד מועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון. את יום חג המצות הזה, זמן חירותנו, מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כיוונו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, מועדי קודשך בשמחה ובששון הנחלת לנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש ישראל והזמנים. ברוך אתה אדוני Eloheinu melech haolam, borei meorei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavdil ben kodesh, ben kodesh lechol, ben or lechoshech, ben Yisrael oamim, ben yom hashvi l'sheshet yemei ha'aseh, ben kiddushat Shabbat, likidushav yom tov, hivdalta, ועד יום השביעי מששת ימי המעשה קידשת, הבדלת וקידשת את עמך ישראל בקדושתך. ברוך אתה אדוני המבדיל בין קודש לקודש. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. הזמן הזה
In the book of Genesis, we are commanded to be a blessing. So as we bless the Kiddush, I want you to think of who in your life is your blessing. And if you happen to be with them in the room, then turn to them and tell them, you know, you are my blessing. And if you're by yourself or they're far away from you, then just gather them in your heart and remember that you've been blessed, that there are people in your life who are your blessing. Who are our blessings tonight? Who are our blessings? We begin the Seder with the washing of hands, a separation of the sacred from the regular, from the ordinary, recognition that this is the beginning of a very, very important ritual. So I wash my hands, but there's no bracha, because this is just a ceremonial washing. And we take something green from the plate before us, something green, the karpas, something that represents the springtime that is about to begin, the springtime that is dawning outside, the birth of new life. And we recite the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'adama, dip it in the salt water and have a nash. Karpas is springtime. Springtime means new life. So what's new this year? What has happened? What is new this year? What came to us that is new this year? Cantor Baron, the people around your table, tell me something that's new this year. Anything new this year? We can't hear you. A little louder.
So Phoenix is going to do the 4 questions. That'll be new this year.
That'll be new. Cantor Fox, what's new this year?
I have all of my family with me, and we've been together in one room for almost 12 months, and we're still alive and talking to each other. So it's
that's wonderful. And my kids are here. That's new this year. Let's think of all the things, the new stuff, the what is chadash, what is new, because in the Hasidic tradition, God is mechadesh. God is the bringer of the new. The possibility that the life we've been sharing isn't stuck, but that new things can enter into our lives and new possibilities can dawn upon the horizon. And that's the gift of freedom. Well, now we begin the telling of the Seder, and I have in front of me 3 matzahs. Matzah. So we take the middle matzah and we're going to break it. And we're going to hide it. And it's going to be dessert a little bit later today. But first, we're going to break this matzah. And this matzah breaks. It's called the afikoman. I'm going to put it away. And whoever finds it is going to earn themselves a college education or a blessing from the rabbi, whichever is cheaper. And as we break the matzah, I think it's important to mention that this year has also been a year of brokenness. So as we remembered who is our blessings this year, let's talk about that brokenness for a minute, because the broken matzah represents a broken world. Who is missing from us this year? Who are the friends, the family, the members of the community taken from us, either by COVID, or if not by COVID, who were alone when they left us? Who are all the things in our culture, in our society, in our environment that are broken this year? Let's think of all the brokenness this year and pray for a year of redemption from this brokenness. The tradition recognizes the matzah at the beginning of the Seder as the poor, flat, dry, tasteless bread of slaves. And it'll be miraculously transformed at the end of the Seder into the food of liberation. And the paradox of all the symbols on the table, the matzah is the bread of slaves and then the bread of liberation. The charoset is the mortar we use to build Pharaoh's monuments, and later it'll be the sweetness that mellows the maror. The karpas represents the new, the springtime, but the salt water is the tears of our ancestors, because tonight we remember both things, that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, oppressed, dehumanized, and broken, and then freed by God with an outstretched hand and an outstretched arm and a mighty hand, freed by God to be free and liberated people. Matzah. Halachma anya da'achlu avatana da'ara de Mitzrayim. This is the flat, tasteless bread that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Kol dichvin yete v'yechu. But we are not going to be small and we're not going to be broken. We invite everyone who is in need to come and to share with us. Kol ditzrich yete v'yifsach. Anyone who would like to taste the sweet bread of liberation, come and join us at this Seder table. Here we are this year in Mitzrayim, next year in a free and whole and healthy world. This year we are here, slaves. Lashana haba b'nei Chorim. Next year we'll be free. Cantor Baron, take it away. Can't hear you, can't hear you, can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear
Now
me?
we can hear you.
Ah, good.
Different from all of the nights? Why is this night different from all of the nights? All of the nights we eat all kinds of bread, but tonight only matzah. All of the nights we eat all kinds of bread, but tonight only matzah. Shebechol halelot anu ochlim she'ar yerakot. Different from all of the nights? Why is this night different from all of the nights? All of the nights we eat all kinds of veggies, but tonight only maror. All of the nights we eat all kinds of veggies, but tonight we eat maror. Shebechol halelot ein anu matbilim afilu ba'am echad. Why is this night different from all of the nights? Why is this night different from all of the nights? All of the nights we don't even dip once, but tonight we dip 2 times. All of the nights we don't even dip once, but tonight we dip 2 times. Shebechol halelot anu ochlim ben yoshvinu ben mesuvim ben yoshvinu ben mesuvim. Halayla hazeh kulanu mesuvim. Halayla hazeh kulanu mesuvim. Why is this night different from all of the nights? Why is this night different from all of the nights? All of the nights we don't need to recline, but tonight we lean to the left. All of the nights we don't need to recline, but tonight we lean to the left.
Why is tonight different from all other nights? Well, first of all, what a wonderful thing that the first thing that a child participates in Jewish life is to ask a question. We teach our children to ask questions because free people ask questions, because that is a sign of freedom. And we want the child to know that his or her questions are always welcome, not just tonight, but every night. That every night a child's questions are important because they're probing and growing, and that's the most important thing that they can do. Well, tonight we have some wonderful questions to answer. Why is tonight different? Why are we eating matzah instead of bread? Why are we eating maror, bitter stuff, instead of the usual? Why are we leaning when we eat? Why are we dipping and touching the foods in weird ways? We have a wonderful story to tell you, a deep and wonderful secret to tell you. But first, 2 digressions, a little detour first. The first detour says that there are 4 kinds of children who sit at our table. The Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, She'eno Yodei Lishol, the wise one and the wicked one, and the simple one and the one who is quiet. They're not really 4 different kinds of children. They're 4 different kinds of people. In fact, they're 4 different states of the soul. We've all been those people. What does the wise one ask? What are all the things we have to do to keep the Pesach right? The wise one is the one who's involved. He is committed. He's participating, and he wants to know how to do it right. The Rasha, the wicked one, says, what's this mean to you? Well, it's unfortunate because what he should be saying is, what's this mean to us? What's the story that means so much to us that we celebrate it year after year after year? But he doesn't want to be a part of the Seder. He sits there at a distance, pushing us away. He's one who doesn't want to be involved. He doesn't see himself as part of the drama of freedom and freedom and liberation. And so we have to remind him that were it not for the Exodus, we'd still be slaves in Egypt. He'd be a slave in Egypt. In fact, if he'd be in Egypt, he'd be one of those who wouldn't believe Moses and would have stayed a slave. The Tam is a simple one who just sees that everything's different and wonders what's going on. In a certain way, that's right, because what's going on today is remarkable. Family gathered, friends are gathered to celebrate freedom. A wonderful spring evening to celebrate the beginning of the new, and how wonderful it is, and how remarkable and how unpredictable life is. The new, who can tell what's coming? And then there's the last one, She'eno Yodei Lishol. We could think of that as a small child who doesn't have words, but I'd rather think of that as a person who wonders, who looks at it all with the eyes of mystery and wonder and says, oh, wow, look at this. Blessings abound about us. The mysteries of life rise in front of us. And aren't we lucky to be together? 4 different states of the soul, 4 different kinds of human beings sit at our table. And each one, we tell the story for that one specifically. And then another quick digression of the rabbis who lived in the 1st century under bitter Roman oppression. And they sat and they told the story, because this was the story that promised them that their oppression would not be forever. This was the story that promised them that might doesn't always win, that might doesn't make right, that the arc of history does in fact bend toward justice, even if it bends slowly and gradually. And even if we'd wish it would come quicker, someday liberation will come. And as the rabbis told this story, and as they told it again, and as they sang the songs, and as they practiced the Pesach, well, their students ran in and said, dawn is breaking. Not that they forgot and watched the sun come up, but because the more we tell the story, the more hope fills us up. Avadim hayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim, v'yotzienu l'Adonai Eloheinu misham b'yad chazaka b'zroa tintia. We were slaves in Egypt, and God freed us. Baruch hamakom baruch hu. Blessed be the God who has given us liberation and freedom. Cantor Baron.
Baruch hamakom baruch hu. Baruch shenatan Torah, shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael. Baruch hamakom baruch hu. Baruch hamakom baruch hu. Baruch shenatan Torah, shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael. Baruch hamakom baruch hu.
It is our obligation to tell this story so that every child and every grown-up and every person at the table hears it. Now, we can tell it from the traditional Haggadah, we can tell it from any number of modern Haggadot, but the custom in my family is to tell it right from the Torah. So let's go to the Torah and let's learn the story together. And because I live in LA, I turned it into a play. Joseph died and all his brothers and all that generation, and the Israelites were fertile and numerous, and they multiplied and increased greatly so that the land was filled with them. There have been many places in the world where we have prospered, in Egypt and across the world. And in many of those places, the same story repeated itself. Those who saw us prosper began to fear us. And a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He did not know how loyal we are to the lands in which we live. He did not know how we tried so hard to be good Englishmen and good Frenchmen, good Italians and good Germans. Oh, we tried to be good Germans. And they hated us nonetheless. And Pharaoh was the first. And he said to his people, look, the Israelites are much too many for us. Let us deal wisely so they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they'll rise up and join our enemies in fighting against us. So isn't it interesting that Pharaoh, who is the commander, the ruler of continents, the most powerful man in the world, and he is afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of the Israelites who fill his land. So first attempt to limit the fertility, the growth of the people of Israel, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built cities for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses, but the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. They ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the labors they made them perform with cruelty. They made life bitter for them with harsh labor at mortar and bricks, with all sorts of tasks in the field. Now, what's interesting about that? You know what the best thing Jews are able to do? We kvetch. We are so good at kvetching. We are the world champions of kvetching. Notice what happens here in the story. Pharaoh makes us slaves, and nobody complained. Nobody protested. Nobody fought back. Nobody said, what? How did he do that? And how come we didn't respond with protest? Because the worst kind of slavery is not the slavery of the body, but the slavery of the mind. The ancient teachers of Israel learned this text, and they said, you know what happens here? The slave becomes a slave, and he becomes such a slave that he forgets that he's a slave. She forgets that she's a slave. And we internalize that position, and we become the people they make us. We become this oppressed people, and that's the worst form of oppression. How do you wake up people up and get them to demand their freedom? That's going to be one of Moses's characteristics. Well, the first attempt to limit the Israelites didn't work. So here's the second attempt. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. Now, Hebrew midwives can mean one of two things. It can either mean that these are Jewish women, Hebrew women, who are midwives to other Hebrew women, but then why would Pharaoh want to talk to them like this? I think that they're Egyptian women who are midwives to the Hebrews. Shiphrah and Puah, after all, are Egyptian names. And Pharaoh commands them, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birthing stone. If the baby's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. Which, of course, is foolish, because if you want to limit a population, you kill the girls, not the boys. But it's not the first sexist to ever live in the world. And midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt told them. Fearing God, the Hebrew is V'tirena et Elohim. Elohim is the God of creation. Women whose job it is to bring babies into the world healthy and whole can't just become killers. The same hands that comfort a mother and put points at pressure to stop the bleeding and bring her comfort as she delivers a baby, the same hands that welcome a child into the world cannot suddenly become the hands of killers. And so the midwives refuse. And this is the first documented case of civil disobedience in the name of a higher justice in all of world literature. So the king of Egypt summoned them because the king wants to know, why you do this? Why have you done this thing, letting the boys live? And the midwives know that Pharaoh's killing people to accomplish his policies. What are they going to do? They repeat back to him his own propaganda. They say to him, because the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They're not normal. They're beasts. Before we can come, they've already given birth. And Pharaoh can't disagree because that's what his own propaganda has been telling them. And the Torah ends this part with a really interesting comment. God rewarded them. the people increased and multiplied. The Israelites increased and multiplied. And because the midwives feared God and they did the right thing, because they resisted power in the name of justice and right, God rewarded them with descendants, which means that if you walk the world looking for help to bring justice to the world, you'll find it in all the corners of the world. My teacher, my beloved teacher, Rabbi Herschel, began to look for Christian and Muslim rescuers of Jews during the Holocaust. And guess where he found them? Everywhere. Everywhere, in every country, in every aspect of society, people of the church and people in government, even Nazis themselves who hid Jewish families, the descendants of Shifra and Pua, who pushed back against cruelty in the name of justice. Well, the first attempt didn't work and the second attempt didn't work. And now Pharaoh wants to get rid of some Jews. So the best thing is just genocide. And he says, every boy that is born, you throw into the Nile, but let the girls live. Well, now the story shifts from the macro to the micro, from a history of a nation and a ruler to one household in the slave quarters with one family, right? A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman, and they had a baby, which is the biggest act of resistance, the most powerful act of resistance. Because after the war, by the way, after the Holocaust, the biggest baby boom ever recorded happened after the Holocaust in the DP camps of Europe. I think that's where Cantor Fox came from. Families who had seen more death than any human being could see came out and breathed free and built families. And so it was with this unnamed family, the house of Levi. The woman conceived and she bore a son, which is dangerous because they were throwing baby boys into the Nile. And when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. Well, it wasn't just that he was a Gerber baby box baby, and that's why she hid him. The Hebrew is Vaiteret Oto Kitov. Kitov. She saw Kitov. Kitov is the words from Genesis, Vayar Elohim Kitov, that there was something cosmic about this child. He had something in him of God. And she hid him for 3 months. And then after 3 months, she couldn't hide him anymore because he's too noisy, or because she couldn't stand the nightmares and the possibility that Pharaoh's police would break in one day and take him. And she decides to take a chance, puts the baby in a basket and floats him up the Nile. And just then, a second woman comes down, a second mother, the daughter of Pharaoh, the daughter of the man who promulgated this genocide, comes down to bathe in the Nile. And while her maidens walked along the Nile, she saw the basket. She's the only one who sees it. The mother could see that the baby was special, and the daughter of Pharaoh is the only one who sees the basket. And they bring the basket, and she opens it. Now, what does her father want her to see? What is she supposed to see? An enemy of the state, an alien, something less than human, but not this woman. She, like the other woman, has special eyes. She can see not an alien, not something that's less than human, not a threat, not an enemy, a baby, a child in need of love. And her maternal instincts are awakened, and she feels love for this child. It says pity, but it's really love. And she knows that it's a Hebrew child. The sister comes and says, I'll find a nurse for the baby. So the boy's mother could nurse him. And then he goes to Pharaoh's palace where he's named Moshe. And the Hebrew is, Minamayim Mishitihu, from the water I will draw him out. I will draw him out, and I did draw him out. Because water and drawing out of water is going to be Moses' career. Well, after that, Moses grows up. And he goes out to see his people. And he sees their suffering. So his mother has special eyes. And his adopted mother has special eyes. And Moses too. Because every other Egyptian sees slaves building a new Egypt and thinks that's economic progress, but not Moses. He sees human beings in pain. They're suffering. And then he sees it on the micro. It's very hard to see a gargantuan evil and do anything about it, but he sees one instance. He sees an Egyptian man, Ish Mitzri, Makeh Ish Ivri, an Egyptian man beating a Hebrew man. He doesn't see Egyptian beating Hebrew. He doesn't see taskmaster beating slave. He sees two men. One man is beating the life out of the other. And Moses looks around to see if there's anyone else there. Is anyone else going to stop this? Is anyone else going to do something about this? But no one does, only Moses. Only Moses. And he realizes this is his moment to decide who he's going to be. Will he be Prince of Egypt and rule over this land, master of all of these slaves? Or will he be the liberator? And decides that's his moment. And he rises up and he strikes down the Egyptian. Well, Moses takes off to the desert after this and spends 40 years working for the priest of Midian, marries his daughter, and lives a very nice, quiet life. And then one day, 40 years later, he's called back into service. Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, drove the flock into the wilderness, and he came to the holy mountain of Horeb, and an angel appeared to him, blazing out of a bush, and he gazed, and there was a bush burning, but the bush was not consumed. He could see that. According to the Midrash, according to the tradition, that bush had been there since the beginning of creation. And he was the only one who could see it. He was the only one who had the eyes to see that this was something extraordinary. And suddenly, God sees that he turns and calls to him, Moshe, Moshe. And he says, here I am. And he says, don't come closer, take off your feet. This is a holy place. And I am the God of your fathers, and I have seen the suffering of my people Israel. Moshe is born of two women who could see what no one else could see. And he himself had eyes to see the suffering in the world when everyone else turned aside and saw nothing. And because he could see the suffering of the world, God could see the suffering of the world. And God says, I have come down to save my people. So Moses goes to Pharaoh. He goes to Pharaoh and stands before Pharaoh, and he says those fateful words, Shlach et ami, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no way, I don't know you, and I don't know your God, and I have no need to let you go. And Moses says, then watch. We all know the song. So Cantor Baron, Mark Ginsburg, lead us in the song. It's really wonderful to have Broadway stars in your shul.
Well, should we start with Avadim Hayinu and then go and we'll do a medley?
Tell the story, brother. Tell the story.
Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, Ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chorin. Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, Ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chorin. Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell, O Pharaoh, let my people go. No more shall they in bondage toil. Let my people go. Let them come out with Egypt's spoil. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. tell old Pharaoh, let my people go.
Moses confronts Pharaoh. A man of God confronts a man who thinks he's God. And Pharaoh can't relent. He can't relent because to relent would be to show weakness, and he can't do that. The Torah says his heart is hardened, but what happens is he gets stuck. The word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. It means to be stuck. It's the narrow place. So one of the things we have to ask ourselves this year is, where am I stuck? How am I like Pharaoh? Stuck in a bad decision, stuck in a bad pattern of relationship, stuck in a bad pattern of behavior. And what would it take to get unstuck? Because being stuck is not good. It brings bad consequences. Moses says to Pharaoh, if you will not let my people go, the horrors of all of nature will come down upon you. And so they do, one at a time, 10 plagues. And each time Pharaoh relents, and then Pharaoh changes his mind again. And we recite these plagues because through these plagues, Pharaoh is humbled. Through these plagues, Pharaoh is destroyed. Through these plagues, Pharaoh is taken apart. But through these plagues, people suffer. And even though they are the ones who enslaved us, they're human beings as we are, and we feel their pain too. So let us recite the plagues now, one at a time, and dip out a little of our wine for each one so that we remember the suffering of the people of Egypt. Ready? Dam, Svardeya, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shechin, Barad, Arbe, Choshech, Makat Bechorot. There's blood. The Nile River turns to blood, and frogs cover the land. And Kinim, bugs and lice come everywhere. And Arov, there's death and destruction. And Dever and Shechin are lice. And Barad is holy hail that comes from the sky and destroys all the buildings and all the crops. And Arbe, the great locust swarms from Africa, come up and eat all of the growing crops. And then Choshech, a darkness so dark a person couldn't take 3 steps in front of him. That's a metaphor for everything that happened in Egypt, a darkness that falls over the land. And then Makat Bechorot, the death of the firstborn, including the firstborn of Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh said, take your people and leave my land. But before we leave the land, we have to sing one more song. It's the song that every Jewish kid in the world knows this Yontif. It's a song about frogs, because there were frogs here, there were frogs there, and there were jumping froggies everywhere. Do we know a song about frogs?
We'll try. One morning when Pharaoh woke in his bed, there were frogs in his bed and frogs on his head, frogs on his nose and frogs on his toes. Frogs here, frogs there, frogs were jumping everywhere. So Pharaoh went to Moses to say, can't you make these frogs go away? There are frogs on my nose and frogs on my toes. Frogs here, frogs there, frogs are jumping everywhere. So here's what you should do, said Mo. You'll have to let my people go, or you'll have frogs on your nose and frogs on your toes. Frogs here, frogs there, frogs are jumping everywhere. Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit.
After the 10th plague, Pharaoh said, take your people and leave my land and go. And then he said to Moses, worship your God and bless me too. Pharaoh is beaten. And so Moses tells the people, come, we have to leave now. now, before he changes his mind again. And so we ran out of the house. You know, my father is a baker, and this was his favorite part of the story, because he said, it doesn't take very long for bread to rise if you have a starter. But that was the point. They had to run. They ran out. They ran out. And they ran to the Red Sea. And at the Red Sea, we thought maybe we were free. But not so. Pharaoh changes his mind one more time. He changes his mind one more time and comes chasing after us. And now comes the scene we all remember. The people of Israel realize they're trapped with the sea ahead of them and Pharaoh's chariots coming screaming down the hill behind them. And they scream to Moses, were there not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us to die here? Jews will always find a moment to kvetch, and they'll become incredibly articulate when they need to kvetch. And so Moses says, just watch. And he turns to God and says, what do I do now? And God says, don't ask, don't pray, move. Sa, he says, move, hold your arm over the sea. And Moses holds his arm over the sea, and the sea opens up and we cross. And Pharaoh chases us down and we cross to the other side. And then Moses holds his arm again and the sea comes back. And then we realized that there was no one chasing us anymore. We were slaves. Our parents were slaves. Our grandparents were slaves. Their parents were slaves. And we had no hope yesterday, except that our children would be slaves and maybe have it easier than we did. And suddenly we turned around and looked at the vast expanse of the wilderness and realized we are free. We're free. We can breathe as free people. And it's from that moment that the Jewish people learned hope. And that is the most important result, the most important gift of the Seder, most important gift of Pesach, or the Passover. We are a people that hope because we were at the sea. That's why Jews in every generation, and no matter what persecution or oppression they suffered, even in the barracks of Auschwitz, sat to tell this story. Because to tell this story is to sustain and rebirth hope. Hope is born again. We saw the sea split. We know that someday we will all be free. And so we gather in all the miracles that are ours, all the blessings that are ours, and thank God for each and every one of them, and sing Dayenu, Ilu Hotzi Hotzianu, Hotzianu Mitzrayim, for each one of the miracles, Dayenu. Cantor Fox.
Hotzi, Hotzianu, Hotzianu, Mitzrayim, Hotzianu, Mitzrayim.
Dayenu.
Da Dayenu, da Dayenu, da Dayenu, 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 da Dayenu, da Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Natan lanu et Shabbat, Natan lanu et Shabbat, Dayenu, da Dayenu, da Dayenu. Da Dayenu, 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 da Dayenu, da Dayenu, da Dayenu, Dayenu, Dayenu. Ilu Natan lanu, et Torah, Natan lanu, Dayenu, da Dayenu, da Dayenu. Da Dayenu, 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 da Dayenu, da Dayenu, da Dayenu, Dayenu, Dayenu.
Chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hi yatsa b'Mitzrayim shene'amar v'yigarat lebincha bayom ha'olemor ba'avur zeh she'asa li Adonai b'tzeiti b'Mitzrayim. Lo et avotenu bilvad gala kodesh baruch hu ela af atanu ga'ali mahem shenemar v'otanu hotzi misham leman hevi otanu letet lehem et haaretz asher nishba lavotehem. In every generation, each one of us must know that we came out of Egypt, not our ancestors, but we came out of Egypt. We taste the bitterness and we experience the thrill, the exhilaration, the gift, the blessing of freedom. And that is what the Seder is all about. And most of all, the hope that if we are slaves today, that tomorrow we will be free. There are three principal symbols of the Seder. And what's remarkable is that each one of them is a paradox. It captures both sides of the story. We were slaves in Egypt, living a life of bitterness, and we're free people, the sweetness of freedom. Pesach is the sacrifice offered in the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. The word Pesach means to hop over, because the angel of destruction hopped over our homes as he destroyed all of the Egyptians and brought us out of Egypt. Matzah. Matzah is the dry, flat, tasteless bread eaten by slaves at the beginning of the Seder. But at the end of the Seder, matzah is the sweet food of liberation. And maror is the bitterness of being a slave. But it is tempered with charoset, with the sweetness of freedom. And that is the gift of this Pesach. We are a people committed to hope, and committed, because we have hope, to share hope with all the people about us, with all the people in the world. No matter how dark our circumstances, we become a light of hope in the world. And that has been our role generation to generation to generation. So let us sing some songs of celebration, some songs of hope, some songs of Hallel. Cantor Baron, Cantor Father.
Nomar lefanav shira chadasha, v'nomar lefanav shira chadasha, v'nomar lefanav shira chadasha, v'nomar lefanav shira chadasha.
Yisrael Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt from the Hallel. Please join me. That was a beautiful melody of V'nomar Lefanav. B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim Beit Yaakov Me'am Elohei Raka Yehuda Lekadsho Yisrael Ma'amishilotav Hayamir Hayanos, Hayarden Yisol, Leachor, He'avim Ragdol, He'elim, Gevaot, Kivene, Son, B'tzeit Yisrael, Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov, Me'am Elohei, Raka Yehuda, Lekadsho Yisrael Ma'amishilotav Milifnei Adon Chuli Aretz Milifnei Eloah Yaakov Ha'ovi Atzor Agam Emayim Chalamish Lemayro Moyim B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim Beit Yaakov Me'am Elohei Raka Yehuda Lekadsho Yisrael Ma'amishilotav B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim Beit Yaakov Me'am Elohei Raka Yehuda Lekadsho Yisrael Ma'amishilotav.
We lift up now a full cup of wine and recite the second blessing over wine. Praised are you, Lord God, whose presence fills the universe, who redeemed us and our ancestors from Egypt and has brought us to this night when we eat matzah and maror. Lord God and God of our ancestors, enable us to celebrate in peace other holy days and festivals, joyful in the rebuilding of your city, Yerushalayim, and joyful in your service. We will sing a new song of thanksgiving for our redemption and for our spiritual liberation. Praised are you, Lord God, Redeemer of the people Israel. Baruch atah melech haolam, asher ga'alanu v'galat avotenu b'Mitzrayim v'gianu l'layla zeh le'achol b'matzah maror. Kein Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohotenu yigienu l'moedim l'raglim v'achirim habayim l'karatenu l'shalom. Smechim b'binyan erecha v'sasim b'vodatecha v'noda lecha shir chadash al gulatenu ve'al pidut nafshenu. Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Every year we invite Elijah into our homes, into our lives, and into our souls, because Elijah represents the ancient and modern and perennial Jewish hope for a world redeemed. So let's rise together. If you can open a door or a window or your heart and sing with Cantor Baron, Eli Navi.
Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishmi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Imhera v'yameinu, Yamo Eleinu. Mashiach ben David, in Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishmi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi.
Now we're about to conclude this part of our Seder. We wash our hands again, this time for the meal that's about to begin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilas yadayim. Amen. You take a piece of matzah. Everyone take a piece of matzah, please. Take a piece of matzah. First matzah of the year. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilas matzah. Blessed is you, praised are you, Lord God, whose presence fills the universe, who has sanctified us, and with the commandment to eat matzah, a symbol of our liberation. Amen. And now take a little bit of the maror, the bitter stuff, and dip it into the charoset, the sweet stuff, and recite with me, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilas maror. And Hillel, the great sage of the first century, combined all the foods together, matzah, maror, and the sacrifice, and he ate them all together. So he tasted the taste of Jewish history, which is bitter and sweet, which is filled with moments of oppression and persecution, but also filled with moments of liberation and redemption and possibility. And that's the Hillel sandwich, as it were. Let's sing one more song, and then we're going to let everybody go have dinner. Cantors, can we do a little Echad Miyodea, a little Khadgar? Let's have a song.
Take it away, Cantor Fox.
Okay, so let's do Khadgar.
Where is that?
That'll be our last one. I'll go medium slow to try to get everybody to be able to participate. And I can't hear your family, Cantor Baron, while we're doing it, but I want to say how much I enjoyed hearing your family today. That year in solitary confinement really did them a lot of good. Their voices are marvelous. So let's go Khadgar. Khadgar, Khadgar. There's Abin Abba betrays Suze. Khadgar. Atashun Rave Achalegadia, Zabin Abba betrays Suze. Khadgar. תאכל בה ונשך לשונרה, דאכל נגדיה, דהזבין אבא ביטרי זוזה, חדגדיה, חדגדיה, ואתה חוצרה והיכה לחלבה, ונשך לשונרה ונאכל לגדיה, דהזבין אבא ביטרי זוזה, חדגדיה,
Come on, you have to sing.
ואתה נורה ושרף לחוטרה, והיכה לחלבה ונשך לשונרה, ואכל לגדיה, דהזבין אבא ביטרי זוזה, חדגדיה, חדגדיה, ואתה מאיה וחלה לנורה, דשרף לחוטרה, והיכה לחלבה ונשך לשונרה, ואכל לגדיה, דהזבין אבא ביטרי זוזה, חדגדיה, חדגדיה. The last one. ואתה קדוש ברוך הוא ושחט למלאך המוות, ושחט לתורה, דשתה למאיה, דחבה לנורה, דשרף לחוטרה, דהיכה לחלבה ונשך לשונרה, ואכל לגדיה, דהזבין אבא ביטרי זוזה, חדגדיה, חדגדיה.
Our biggest thanks to Cantor Fox and Cantor Barron and all of your families. Thank you. Thank you for your music and thank you for your spirit and your love. A big thanks to Yona Feinstein for making all of this technically wonderful and possible. And a thank you to everyone who's joined us at our Seder table tonight. Lishana haba b'Yerushalayim. Next year, if not in Yerushalayim, at least God willing in person, so we can all be together to celebrate the Pesach. We wish you a sweet and happy and healthy and wonderful Kasher Pesach. In the tradition of my ancestors, a Zisen Pesach should be a Pesach of sweetness. Enjoy your holiday and take good care. Good night, Hag Sameach.
Sure, you can turn this off now. Sure. Okay, let's eat.
Right.
Hi, Matt.
You know,
חברים יקרים, השנה אומנם כל אחד מאיתנו חוגג את פסח לבד בבית. אבל התזמורת הפילהרמונית ואני, שמתגעגעים אליכם מאוד, הכנו לכם משהו מיוחד. מקווה שתהנו.